Yes, graduates, welcome to Hard Talk Podcast with HTK. Fasten your seatbelts. Hey, users and subscribers, welcome back to another episode of Hard Talk with HTK. Listen, I think that we have reasonably so given certain things a little break when it comes to the Justice for Jayden operation. But I want you to understand that we have not forgotten this little boy, and we will continue to ensure that his story does not die. Now, in this episode, we are going to explore one of the critical things that was mentioned in this whole process that we need to look into a little bit further. As Hurricane Melissa has ravaged certain parts of our island and people are busy trying to get their lives back in order, we have to remember that Jaden Smith has not yet been found. And it is even more devastating now as we think about things, because we know that this Category 5 hurricane would leave absolutely no survivors if you are existing out in the bushes without any kind of protection, no kind of safe refuge. So right now, when it comes to where we're at with this investigation, it's really about recovery. Jaden Smith's mother is still very much distressed. I'm sure by now you have seen the video that has gone all over when the MP spoke to Jaden's mother. And you can see it in her body language, how distraught she is, how upset she is. The woman looks like a shadow of herself when she first came out. You can tell that between the time when she speak to Ellie Lewis and now, it coming like say she just lose one whole heap of weight. The woman look like she's been crying non-stop, because she knows that if her child is out there or was out there during Melissa, survival is very, very slim. As the death count continues to rise, bodies are still being recovered in various parts of St. Elizabeth, Hanover, Clarendon, Black River. We can, just imagine how people are feeling out there, knowing that their family members are missing and hearing that this death toll just keeps rising. There are people who are yet to be recovered as a result of it. Roads are blocked. So you know that the Jamaica Constabulary Force and the Jamaica Defense Force, they have their hands very, very full. And it is so possible that things where Jaden Smith is concerned will not be prioritized. So it really is down to us as the voice of the people like us on the internet, to keep things going so that we do not forget what has happened to Jaden Smith. Now, let's remind ourselves about what the uncle, which is the father of Sheneque, what did he say about Sheneque's arrival? Let's remind ourselves right here.
While Jayden at school, yes,
Sheneque and his friend named Tommy were living in our area, so was poetry at the same time, go freshen up because carry no clothes from foreign. So he just go as poetry up the telebox for me white boss.
Yeah, but what about time?
I really remember time like that, not already early morning. Early morning part.
No, what we're talking about the time now when Jayden supposed to be at school. Yes, until him got the local fast food place. Yes, and at that time you were on the road.
Yes.
Hustling. Yes, and so that's now. But where were Sheneque at the time?
Sheneque and Tommy, that's poetry. Yes, that's poetry.
So did you notice that the uncle said that Sheneque was present at the hospital on Friday morning? Early about 9 o'clock them time there? And remember, she then went to Spur Tree in order to freshen up and change. This was Friday morning. Now remember, Sheneque said she never saw Jaden. Never ever saw Jaden ever. She said that Jaden was present at the hospital on Thursday, but that she hadn't seen Jaden because she didn't arrive until Friday. Yet, Friday morning, the uncle is saying she went to actually change. She went to freshen up at Spur Tree in an early morning time. Now, we are going to take a look at when flights arrive at Montego Bay from the United States of America. If you do a general search, it will tell you that flights arrive at various times depending on which state you are flying in from. However, the general rule of thumb is that flights start to arrive in Montego Bay from the United States at around 10 o'clock in the morning. There are morning flights, afternoon, and evening flights. Now, there are two rumors about where Sheneque is from. Other people think that she's from California. Some people think she is from Carolina. This particular post that I'll pin right here says that she is from South Carolina. Now, we're going to do a little bit of investigation around South Carolina and California just to determine the kind of flights, how often they come in, the time frame. There is also this piece of evidence here that shows that Sheneque has some ties to Philadelphia. She did do a photo shoot in Philly. It may not be recent, but we're going to work in Philadelphia as well into the picture just to cover all bases. So we have Philadelphia, California, and Carolina, okay? Let's take a look at the general timetable of flights from these places directly to Montego Bay. So you can travel from South Carolina via Charleston Airport or Charlotte Airport. We're going to examine two of those airports and their schedule by looking at what a typical Friday would look like traveling from those places to Montego Bay. One of the first things I noticed was that there was no direct flight going from Charleston to Montego Bay. You had to stop over or change flights, and this was generally the rule for all of the airlines. So we tested out a Friday to see what a typical Friday looks like arriving from Charleston to Montego Bay, and just looking at the timetable and what that actually looks like. Now, as you can see, the earliest flight that arrived from Charleston is around 10 o'clock in the morning in Montego Bay. So we're talking about 10:06, 10:10, them kind of times there, in at the 10 o'clock region. So that discounts the fact that she could have flown in from Charleston to Montego Bay to get there in time for what the uncle says is a freshen up in Spurtree. Remember, says around 9 o'clock in the morning, him said that him give her the keys, okay? So that Friday morning, she could never have been flying in from Charleston. So let's take another look at the other airports. Sorry guys, I'm not looking away from you. I'm looking at my screen because I want to go through this as I'm speaking to you in kind of real time. So just looking at these flights here, you've got one that leaves at 6 a.m. and it arrives at 2:29. Remember, the cousin also said that she arrived at 2 p.m. Remember the cousin, that is Tammy, that we now know is the friend that is Tammy? Yes. So Tammy in her interview said she arrived at 2 p.m. So I'm just looking through here, and the flights that arrive close to that time, there is one here that arrives at 1:46, one that arrives at 2:29, and so on. Now, according to this, the one that arrives at 2:29 p.m. would have left at 6 a.m. It's an 8-hour flight. So give or take approximity, it could be that it's that flight that is being referred to by the cousin that arrives at that time. It does have one stop. There is one that leaves at 7:13 p.m. the previous day, as in the Thursday, as in she would have been traveling overnight. That is a 19-hour stretch. So there's a hell of a layover there. It would have arrived at about 2:29 p.m. Now, I did test to see if these times changed every Friday. No, they are standard. They are set times that these airlines do arrive. There is also American Airlines. They also arrive around 2:12 p.m. The earliest flight for them arriving at about 11:21 a.m. So, you know, and oh no, tell a lie, one arrives at 10:08. So the earliest flight for them arrives in about the 10 o'clock region. There is a flight that arrives at 2:50, one that arrives at 3, and so on. Okay, so those are the kind of timings that we're looking at, with 10 o'clock being the earliest arrival time in the morning, which really discounts what the uncle is saying. If the uncle is saying that she's arriving at 9, or at least she got there for around early in the morning, and then 9 o'clock he was able to hand her the keys so that she could go to Spur Tree to freshen up. Now, if it is that we're looking at this particular airport and she lives in South Carolina, as the person on that post claimed, and she traveled via Charleston Airport, there's no way she would have gotten into the country for 9 o'clock in the morning to be able to get keys from the uncle to then go to Spur Tree. Because the only way that Sheneque would have been able to do this is if she had spent the night in the country and that she arrived on the Thursday. So Charleston, it not really a line up with what the uncle come out and say. It's not lining up with the story about her getting into the airport to relieve the mother, to then travel to Spur Tree to freshen up and all these things. Because there is no wee hours in the morning flight coming in from Charleston Airport. Okay, we are going to check Charlotte Airport. Let's see if there's any difference there. Now remember, we are covering all bases, and yes, of course, the post said that she was in South Carolina, Greenville to be exact. Now we're going to also check North Carolina. You never know, maybe, Mama spend the night at a friend, she did somewhere else, I don't know. So we're going to cover everything. So we're going into Charlotte, which is the airport that caters for North Carolina, and let's check out what's happening here. So I did a search on that, and once again, the earliest flights we're looking at is 10 o'clock in the morning. We've got 10:12 a.m. The latest we've got, I think, is in the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock region. Yeah, we've got 4:34 p.m. There is a 2:12 p.m. arrival more than one time. So that's in the 2 o'clock region. We have a 2:30 or 2:29. So those are the kind of timings that we're looking at. The timings also indicate that there is also a stop. So there is no direct flight once again, right? There is a one stop. Some of them have ridiculously long layovers where you would have been traveling from 5 p.m. the following day to get there after 1 in the afternoon, 24 hours later or nearly 24 hours later. So we've got some lengthy layovers for this particular one. Now it's not impossible. Remember, the incident took place on the Thursday, and if they were at the hospital pretty late, and she was hearing that the child was not getting through and everything was not being handled properly, it is possible that she would have started traveling from the day before. Now, remember, she heard that they arrived at the hospital in around the 7 o'clock region, and that's when she made the decision, right? Because they were at the hospital from in the evening, and it was nearly midnight before they actually got seen to be registered. That's the Thursday night, right? Thursday, midnight, well, Friday morning, the wee hours of the morning, right? So having heard that, she would have heard that her child was not getting through, she's not happy, and she decided to then take a flight down. Those were her words. Now, if this is the case, then we have some flights here at 7:56. Mama would have had to been ready. You understand? We have some that are at 9:45 in the night and so on. So she would have had to have checked in, been on the flight, all of that within that time frame. What's the likelihood of that? That the day before, the Thursday when the incident happened, that she would have been so on the ball. Well, she did arrive without any clothes, didn't she? So that's not impossible that she just up and went, right? And said, listen, me never have time for pack. Me just a go. You understand? So we've got some at 8:45 p.m., 7:56 p.m., those kind of night times on the Thursday. So had she left the day before, she could have left on those flights and arrived. But then the timings, once again, for arrival does not coincide with anything that either Tammy or the uncle actually said. None of those kind of flights arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning or before that. None of those flights arrive at 2 p.m., which is what the other one said. So I'm still not convinced that this is the airport that she flew from. Now we're going to test out California. Now in California, there are several airports. Bear with me, Go on, hold your faith, because I'm going to show you something. So you have Los Angeles, you have San Francisco, Sacramento, San Diego, and Santa Ana. We're going to test all of them. Yes, you better believe it. So we're checking Los Angeles Airport. And in Los Angeles Airport, once again, the earliest flights that we have are around 10 o'clock in the morning arrival time. I'm not seeing any here that gets her in on time for Friday morning in the wee hours so that by 9 o'clock she's off to Spurtree in order to freshen up with her friend Tammy. I'm seeing arrivals being around 1:46 p.m., 1:07 p.m., 10:12 a.m., 3 p.m., 10:08 a.m., 10:12, 1:07, 4:50, 10:12 a.m., 12:39, 4:34 p.m. These are the kind of times I'm hearing, none of which match either the 2 p.m. said by Tammy or the 9 o'clock in the morning said by the uncle. So Los Angeles, unfortunately, eliminated. Let's try the other ones. So now we're going to check San Francisco Airport. So San Francisco, I'm looking at the timings here. We're looking at 12:45 p.m. arrival, 12:23, 1:46, 12:39. After 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the earliest I've seen so far, 10:12 a.m. All of which are around, here we have a 2:05 p.m. one. So that one kind of lines up to what Tammy is saying, that she arrived at 2 p.m. So it could be that one. She would have had to have left 7:10 p.m. the previous day. So 7:10 p.m., that could have been, close to when she found out. Mama said 10 minutes after finding out. So she got run to the, I don't know how close she lives to this airport, right? But considering that you need 2 hours at least checking in time, it would have meant that she would have gotten to that airport around 5. It would have meant that whatever accident took place was between 3 and 4 p.m. thereabout. But I'm pretty certain that that's not what the aunt said in terms of the timings of when the accident took place. Let's remind ourselves.
On the way to the hospital, that is when I called my daughter to let her know that something happened to Zaire. I even took the picture of Zaire's leg in the car and sent it to my daughter. Zaire's leg was also on Jaden's foot because Zaire, me and Jaden was at the back of the car. You understand? When I went to the hospital, I went to Hargreaves first. The justice I got at Hargreaves, I was not satisfied. So we left with the letter to go to Mandeville. I was there until minutes to 12 before Zaire name called for me to go back inside. And I never get through until minutes after 5 the next morning when they said that after we got through, we get inside and they sent me to do an x-ray because when the doctor saw Zaire, she said to me, this is not looking good. She said, bring him into the room, let we examine him. When she pulled the baby pampers, she called a next doctor and said, it seems like the baby broke some bone. And she write up the x-ray paper immediately and she sent me to the x-ray. It was me and my husband that was there because my husband was still there with me.
Because they went with you? Okay.
Yes, all of them went with me. Because normally when we go out, we don't leave anybody.
Okay, good.
And we went to the x-ray, we get the x-ray done, and I went back in because they would send the report to the doctor by the screen then. So you wouldn't have to bring the paper itself to the doctor. So when she looked at it, she said to me that the baby bone break. And I was sent back again to sit in the seat again until minutes after 6 when they said to me that they're going to admit the baby. It was about maybe 5:30 some minutes to 6 that my husband said to me he's going to leave because remember the kids are going to school. I said, okay.
So let's think about the timings that we've just heard, okay? Remember, she said that Zaire and Jaden, everybody was playing. She heard Zaire scream out and she decided to take Zaire to the hospital. Fine. She jumped in the car, everybody, jumped in the car and took the baby to the hospital. Now, she hasn't given quite specific timings about this, but we can use some common sense here. Remember, this is a Thursday. Jaden would have gone to school. Jaden's school finishes in about the 3 o'clock region. He usually gets home around 4, that kind of timing. based on the things that we have heard said before in terms of the timings and when school ends. Now, Jayden would have then, relaxed a bit, take off his uniform, blah, blah, blah. So we're talking about the 4 to 5 o'clock region when he'd be chilling with his cousin in the living room before this whole thing kicks off. Remember, she also mentioned that she was cooking from the Thursday night. So cooking did not go on. Everybody busy. She in our bedroom. I don't know who's doing the cooking. Maybe it was the man. But anyway, between 4, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock is when we're looking at in terms of time frame. They would have then driven from Newport to the hospital. That journey is about half an hour, she claims, because remember, she also accounted for the time frame that it took from the hospital to Newport when the father, or rather the uncle, had to take the kids back to the house in order to get them ready for school. So she said it was a half an hour drive. So we're giving her that half an hour drive, right? To Newport from Mandeville Hospital. So we're adding time on in terms of even transport to get there. We get there, we're looking at about 5:36. Then we're at about traffic. Them kind of times would have traffic. So we're at 6 o'clock, them kind of hours. And she first went to Hargreaves. She wasn't happy with the service she got there. She got a letter. So time is clocking up here before she ends up at Mandeville Hospital. And remember, during this 4 to 5 to 6 o'clock region is when she would have texted and said, here is a picture of what's going on with your child. Okay, and I'm taking your child to the hospital, to her daughter. So this gives this daughter between the hours of 4 to 6 to then make a decision that she needs to go. So we're talking about between the hours of 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 where she would get a flight 9 o'clock at night. Okay? Just bear with me in terms of the time frame, but we're approximating. And if we're making an educated guess here, she would have had to have made that decision pretty quickly, given herself that 2-hour security clearance and checking in time, in order to turn up at the airport, buy a ticket, etc., etc. And don't forget, traveling between her house and the airport unless she literally lives on the doorstep. So there's quite a bit involved here in terms of her traveling in order to get here on Friday morning. Do you understand? Now, if she gets to the airport Thursday night in order to get here in the wee hours of Friday morning, that is just not possible, because none of the flights between 7 and 9 in the night actually arrive early in the morning. They all arrive in the afternoon. When he said he saw his daughter and then at Friday morning he handed her keys, it's not making sense, because there's no way she would have arrived so quickly coming in from the United States. These timings do not make sense at all. And remember, these are connected flights, and a lot of the flights are connecting via Atlanta or Miami or New York, and none of them come in at that time. So that 9 o'clock that he mentioned, or that early in the morning on Friday morning, is not making any sense, because the only time she could have arrived is in the afternoon. That's the only time she could have arrived, in the afternoon, based on the timings of when the incident took place, when she would have gotten on the flight, and when the flights would have landed, based on booking a ticket in that time frame. The latest so far, based on the airports we're looking at, would have been checking in at about 9:50 p.m. if she left at this kind of airport that we've just mentioned, right? So any of those airports, about 9 o'clock thereabouts. And yes, indeed, there are flights that will get her in the following day at about 1:07, okay? But definitely not 2 o'clock. Not in the 2 o'clock region at all, according to Cammy, aka Tammy, the cousin / friend, in this interview. Let me just remind you about what Cammy, the so-called cousin, claims in terms of timings. Take a listen.
So when my cousin got to Jamaica to relieve my aunt from the hospital, because when she landed in Montego Bay, she landed after 2 in Montego Bay. From Montego Bay to Mandeville is like a 3 hours drive. She went straight to Mandeville so she could relieve my auntie so she could go home from the hospital. That was Friday night. So she got to the hospital around after 7 p.m. When my aunt went home, that's when she realized that Jayden is not home. That's when the discovery was made that Jayden did not reach home from school.
Now, I did check Sacramento, and it didn't even make sense looking any further, because for Sacramento to actually be the airport that she departed from in California, she would have had to have left from the previous morning in order to arrive on the Friday, right? The layovers are stupid. The shortest amount of travel time I see is leaving from 12:15 p.m. So that's just quarter past lunchtime, right? And by then, there was nothing wrong with baby, okay? Zaire's leg was not broken. So, could never have possibly been this particular flight. It just doesn't make sense that she would have traveled from the previous day at this time. I mean, mind you, there is one that leaves at 4 p.m. and arrives at 1:46 p.m. Jayden leaving school to get home in time for all of that? I kind of don't think so. Considering that this incident took place on a Thursday, Jayden would have been at school that day. So, no, that doesn't quite work at all. We do have a 5:40 p.m. flight, but then again, the window is also quite narrow between when Jayden left, the incident took place. She would have needed to check in, travel time to get to the airport, to get checked in, to pass security. I don't know. I am not convinced that this particular airport would have been the one. Okay. There's just something that's not quite right here. There is one that's at 7:56 p.m., which I suppose is late enough. It does get in at about 1:07, and there's one that arrives at 2:20. There were 2 stops. Very, very expensive. Massive layover once again. I'm still not convinced, but once again, the earliest that any of these flights arrive is 10:08 in the morning. 10:08. I see nothing that arrives on time for her to be first thing in the morning at 9 o'clock, according to the uncle, going to Spur Tree to freshen up. So I'm eliminating Sacramento. Now let's check out San Diego, okay? Now, San Diego, from what I can see here, you have got some long layovers once again. None of them are direct. You've got 1 stops and 2 stops in between. Just looking at the times, right? The earliest that she would have gotten there, once again, we're looking at 10:08 in the morning. And I'm just looking at when she would have had to have traveled by in order to get there for that time. She would have had to have left at 12:40 p.m. So that's 20 to 1 in the afternoon. That never happened at that time. You understand? Jayden's still there, school and all these things. So I'm just looking through this. We've got 5:50 p.m. Okay, so she could have gotten that one. That one arrives at 2:05 p.m. But think about it. It takes 2 hours to go through security, even without bags on this airline. I do not think she would have gotten there on time and managed to make it through. 5:50 p.m. to 2:05. She would have needed 2 hours. That's 3:50. She would have had to have arrived by. It just cannot work. I just don't think so, because she would have had to have known about the situation long enough in order to arrange herself to get herself there to buy herself a ticket, or to get there to buy the ticket. I don't know. Quite an expensive ticket as well. I don't think so. They've got one here that's at 8:40 p.m. That's a little bit more reasonable. It does arrive at 1:46 p.m. So circa the 2 p.m. That was claimed by Tammy. That's a 14-hour flight. And that one, I suppose, is doable. That would have given her ample time, and she would have gotten there on time for the 2 o'clock that they claimed, meaning the cousin, Tammy, which we now know is the friend. Lord Jesus, keep with me, okay? But the uncle said 9 o'clock in the morning. Who's lying, really? Because somebody's lying. Is it 9 o'clock in the morning on the Friday morning? Because something not right. None of these flights get in on time on the Friday for that. None. The earliest, once again, 9:52 a.m. So this one's a little bit more impressive, but it's still around the 10 o'clock in the morning mark. Based on what the uncle said, I'm going to eliminate, once again, San Diego. So now that leaves us with Santa Ana, okay? We are going to go through the flights of Santa Ana to see if there's any possibility there she could have gotten in the wee hours of Friday morning. So just looking through the departing flights. And, okay, so once again, the earliest flight I'm seeing, 10:12 a.m., 10:08 a.m., 10:12. None that arrives in the wee hours. This is the 10 o'clock region again. All right, we're going to check the 2 p.m. Time frame that was given by the friend / cousin, Tammy. All right, let's see if we find anything logical there. Okay, so 1:46 p.m., but she would have had to have left from 12:25 a.m. So that's 25 minutes after midnight. Okay, that's not too bad. That's a possibility. Remember, it's around 12 o'clock then they got through with the registration. That would have given her ample time in order to get to the airport, in order to depart, to turn up in Jamaica for round about 2 p.m. So that one is a possibility. But then that's a 1:46 p.m. slot. And she would have cleared, because she doesn't have any bags, there's not much there to check, so she would have passed through security fairly quickly. I don't think it would have taken 15 minutes, I'm not gonna lie, because she's got to move from there and then she's got to go get the coach. So somehow that one is a very slim margin that she would ever exit that airport at 2 p.m. It still doesn't quite grab me, that time frame, so I'll keep going. The rest arrives at 3 p.m. There is one that arrives at 12:48, so that would have given her ample time to exit the airport and get the 2 o'clock coach, possibly. But then she would have had to have left from 3:53 p.m. 2 hours in order to clear security and to check in, even though she doesn't have a bag. That's why I've taken an hour off. No, by them time there, baby's ire is fine, so that not quite work. No, let me keep going. Then the rest, they arrive a bit later, 4:15. It's still not a reasonable time slot. There is a 5:40 p.m. It doesn't arrive until 1:07. That does give her a bit of time. Possibly she could have cleared the airport in an hour, possibly, on an efficient day in Montego Bay Airport, Sangsters. Maybe. Maybe. 5:40 p.m. Damn, that would have been a mother that's hot on it. You know what I'm saying? Somehow I'm still not convinced based on the timings of the aunt. But like I said, in terms of approximations, this is where some possibility arrives. So I'm not 100% eliminating this route here, but there are still some serious questions about the timings that are thrown up by Tammy and by the uncle. Because if the uncle is claiming that at 9 o'clock in the morning she went to Spur Tree to freshen up with her friend Tammy, then, and that on no occasion did she see Jayden, then it would mean that she would have had to have arrived before 9 o'clock. I've looked through California. I've looked through Carolina, north and south. I've looked through all the potential airports, and none of these timings align. Now let's check Philadelphia. So I've checked through Philadelphia, and it's the same kind of story. Thank God Philadelphia only have one international airport, because I'm getting fed up. I don't know about all of me. I get fed up because I still can't prove that this Uber to reach in time for 9 o'clock in the morning. The earliest flights, once again, we're looking at 10:12 a.m., just after 11. Those kind of hours, none of these arrive in the wee hours of the morning. None of them. Now, there are some that arrive just after 1, where she would have had to have departed from 6:50 p.m. the previous day. That is possible, given the circumstances. That would have given her time to clear the airport, bearing in mind she has no luggage, so she would have cleared fairly quickly. That's an 18-hour journey. And it's not too expensive a ticket. That one is a possibility, right? But it's still not the 2 p.m. that was claimed, but it still gives her time to exit the airport, possibly on an effective day, and catch her 2 o'clock coach, especially if she pay for it on the spot and so on. But I remember how Montego Bay Airport set up. There's a little bit of a walk between getting out, heading across, buying a ticket. There's a process, right? That's quite tight, but it's not impossible. Lots of rushing. She not a bag. Not impossible, right? Okay. Not impossible, but it's kind of unlikely. There's a lot of walking in Montego Bay Airport to exit. Security checks, meandering, lots. But anyway, there's that time. The rest of them is like 2:50 p.m. Out of the 2 stories and the 2 timings that we've heard between the uncle and Tammy, or Cammy, it sounds as though the more feasible is definitely the friend's story, that she arrived at 2, she got to the hospital around 7 p.m. It would have given her ample time to clear customs, to get on a coach, to book herself on and travel. Now she's claiming that it's a 3-hour journey. When I double checked to see the timings, it was giving 1 hour and a half, 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I'm not quite sure where she got the 3 hours from in terms of the travel between Montego Bay Airport and Mandeville. The distance between Mandeville bus stop and the hospital is actually not very far either. So I'm not certain why she said it takes 3 hours on that bus journey, other than she's trying to account for time. This part is a bit strange, because had she come in at 2 o'clock, she would have been in the vicinity around 4-ish, 5 o'clock. It would have given her a couple of hours in between before she got to the hospital, bearing in mind that this situation was on a Friday afternoon now that we're talking about, which means there's still some unaccounted for time that would have coincided with when Jayden was on the road. Remember, they were giving times like 3:59, 3:49 to between 4-5 o'clock. So we're getting some timings here where he was on the road, where she could have been on the road at the same time heading to the hospital. She could have diverted from the bus terminal to the school. All sorts of things could have happened there. So the uncle gave a very odd time, and that was way off. It's not making sense, that 9 o'clock. And to be honest, out of everybody, I think he's the more honest one, as in he talks without thinking, which means that he's more likely to release information that the rest, the secretive ones, would want to hide. And if he's saying that on Friday morning is when he gave her the keys, then there's no way she could have entered the country in the 2 o'clock region. It just doesn't make sense. Whereas if it's a 2 o'clock thing, why is he lying and saying that it was in the morning that he saw his daughter and gave his daughter the keys to go to Spur Tree? Why is he lying about that? It doesn't add up at all. And this tells us 2 things. Tammy was already in the country on Thursday, even when the incident took place. Tammy did not fly in from any of those places on time. And I can go into random places in America. All of the flights are looking at about 10 o'clock for arrival. If the uncle is claiming that she was there at 9 o'clock in the morning, the only way Tammy could have been there at 9 o'clock in the morning to go and get keys and go to Spur Tree to freshen up is if she arrived on Thursday. If she arrived on Thursday, then she was around when Zaire got damaged. If she was around when Zaire got damaged, there is more to that story. When Zaire's leg got broken or femur got broken, it may not have been Jayden who did it, but Jayden may have witnessed what took place. There is a motive here, and tracking down exactly when she entered the actual country is the piece of the puzzle that is missing. It also tells us that a plan was made with Jayden from in the Thursday. And that's why Jayden kept insisting that his cousin was coming to pick him up on Friday after school. Because discussions were already in motion. They were already had. Right? So this was already a plan. There would have been ample time for Jayden to have had this discussion to know who's picking him up after school. You remember, the uncle is trying to make it out that there's no way Sheneque had anything to do with anything because Sheneque never saw Jayden at all. Remember in her first video, she spoke with such certainty that Jayden was present and she used we a lot. Just a reminder.
So at no point in time I thought anything ill of the situation. Immediately the thing is, okay, let's take him to the hospital and find out what is wrong. So yes, found out that he broke his femur. Okay, and we're just in the process of just getting treatment. Initially, Jayden was at the hospital on the Thursday night when it happened. Then everybody left my mom at the hospital with the baby, went home. Jayden went to school the following day and just did not come back home today. So mom was at the hospital with me on Friday when she left to go home, and then she called me saying that Jayden is not home.
So on that basis, it's clear to me that Sheneque may very well have been at that hospital. She may very well have been there, along with Jayden and her brother Damar and her mother and her uncle. And that she then was able to leave, go do what she wanted to do, come back, relieve the mother, go again in the morning, and so on and so forth. Right? Now, if you notice they're talking about, oh, there's hospital footage. How much you want to bet me said the hospital footage, the hospital camera them now work? And that certain things now go get pick up. I bet you any money that them the hospital camera there now work and now go pick up nothing. And the few that are working, probably not in them vicinity. All I know is that Sheneque did not get into the country on the Friday morning in order for her to be able to go to Spurtree at 9 o'clock as the uncle claimed. So that means that the uncle is lying or Tammy is lying. Remember what Tammy said. Tammy gave very specific timings. So none of these timings do not add up, people. And this is where I expect the investigation to look next. It is imperative that we fully understand the timings mentioned by the family members and that this is confirmed with her comings and goings through Sangster's International Airport. 9 o'clock, 2 o'clock, which is it? And why would one be lying against the other? Who misspoke and let the cat out the bag? I believe it was the uncle. Hence the reason why he was running away from Ellie Lewis and speaking to him again, because he was letting out too much information. There is a lot more to that child's femur getting broken than we are looking into. Remember, it is about a scapegoat. And Jayden was sacrificed, but not in the way that everybody is speaking about. He was a scapegoat for what took place with that child. He either witnessed something that they wish he didn't, or they wanted to punish him for that situation. But you know what? I'm going to leave it at that. Because it is clear to me that somebody is hiding Sheneque's entry into the country. and that there is a reason why that's being hidden. Either way you take it, Sheneque, fingers point towards you. What did you do with Jayden Smith? And why are so many people lying to cover your tracks? If you've made it this far into this video, please do not forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe button as we continue to say justice for Jayden. And we will not stop until we get that justice. This is your girl, Head Teacher K, and I'm out.